presenting our valuation of FLIR, and then Ross and Ryan are going to be answering questions. So in this presentation, we're going to discuss our brief investment summary, then talk about their business and industry, then provide a few risks, and finally get into our valuation. Starting with the investment summary, we arrived at a price target of $27.73, representing a 7.19% undervaluation as of closing yesterday. And while we see an upside potential for FLIR, the market has mostly priced this in, and in accordance with CFA disclosures, we are recommending a hold. There are a few main drivers to our valuation. The first being FLIR's commitment to shifting revenues from about 50% commercial and 50% government to almost 70% commercial, and we see them reaching this target in our terminal year 2016. We also project EBITDA margin to expand from about 26% to almost 30% in our terminal year, driven mostly by our 17% compound annual growth rate in the thermal vision and measurement section, as Jack will discuss momentarily. We also feel that this expansion will come because FLIR will be able to reduce operating costs slightly faster than unit prices are falling in order to enter the commercial markets. Jack will now discuss the business.
In 2010, FLIR had 5 operating segments. These operating segments can be combined into 2 overall divisions. The first division was the Government Systems Division, and it consisted of the ICX and Government Systems segments, and accounted for roughly 51% of that year's revenue. The second division is the Government and the Commercial Systems segment, and that consisted of the Thermography, Commercial Vision Systems, and Ray Marine segments, and accounted for roughly 49% of revenue in 2010. For our projections and our analysis, we focused on FLIR's main business model strategy, which is their commercial operating model. In this model, they're committed to taking their government-produced products and finding commercial applications for them. And in doing so, they open them up to wider markets and achieve economies of scale in order to lower their unit prices. This is really important for FLIR because their products are highly price elastic. As you can see, they've experienced, with small decreases in prices, they're reaching much greater increases in unit volume and revenue. And this is something that they are looking to continue doing going forward. In recent years, they're about 50-50 government and commercial, and with the help of management guidance and their commercial operating model, we project that they're going to reach their goal of 70% commercial and 30% government by the year 2016. Their business and their commercial operating model are very dependent on some overall industry factors that we've identified in our presentation. And the 3 that we are going to discuss today are the government spending, the increased commercialization of the industry, and international competition. Since many of the players in this industry depend on the government for a material portion of their revenue, government spending, or more specifically the Department of Defense budget, is very important to this industry as a whole. And it's projected going forward that it's going to decrease as we try to lower our military presence globally. However, the government has been noted as saying that they're looking to streamline the military operations and increase their dependence on technology in order to put less command in danger. And President Obama said that we're going to shift our focus toward intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, which is something that will be benefiting the thermal imaging industry as a whole. So going forward, we project that the government spending for this sector is going to be staying the same or increasing. The second factor we identified was increased commercialization. Within this industry, 3 of the sectors have been experiencing relatively meager growth that are between 3 and 6%. However, the commercial system has been experiencing growth of around 22%, and this is largely as firms within this industry have been finding new commercial applications, such as recreational hunting or increased automobile vision and biohazard detection. And so we also expect this to continue between many of the members of the industry going forward. And the third and final factor we're going to be discussing today is that of international competition. Exports within the infrared and ultraviolet apparatus industries in 2004 were mostly dominated by Europe at around 80%. However, in 2011, much of this has shifted to North America and Asia. This increased international competition is largely, again, a result of that increased commercialization and this opening up to new markets. And so we continue to expect this to cause increased price pressure and a more important placement on brand equity going forward. So now we've talked about the business and the industry. In combination, these will have these expose FLIR and its competitors to a number of threats, which Jake will be talking about next.
So we also considered several risks to our evaluation, and these risks stem from 3 main areas. The first is government, second is FLIR strategy and operations, and finally financial. So looking at a couple government risks, FLIR relies on the US government for a material portion of their revenue, and these contracts are subject to routine auditing and investigation. And while most of these investigations have no outcome, the most common resolution is price cuts, which could hinder their top line growth in the ICX and other government segments, and so we took that into consideration when projecting revenues. The U.S. FLIR's revenue from the U.S. has been declining. Although the revenue over the past few years has been climbing, the U.S. Government revenue has been declining, and so that's helping to mitigate this risk going forward. The U.S. also requires FLIR to obtain export licenses for their products being shipped abroad, and while the export licenses for munitions has a relatively high approval rating at 67%, as FLIR shifts their focus to more commercial markets, they're going to have to get dual-use export licenses, which have a much smaller approval rating at 3%, where 86% are required to have conditions, which might be modifications in their product or price. FLIR also faces risks from their strategy and operations. They've made 13 acquisitions since 2003, and we expect them to make more going forward. These acquisitions are largely strategic in that they're trying to establish relationships with suppliers and gain more manufacturers overseas. And if they're unable to integrate these acquisitions in effectively, their margins will be hurt. The industry is characterized by technological innovation and frequent product introductions, which leads to importance on intellectual property. That's FLIR's countered that by investing between 8 and 10% of revenue in R&D, and that's 8.71% average over the past 5 years, and we expect them to remain in that range going forward. Their main financial risk is their exposure to 3 main currencies: the Swedish krona, the euro, and the British pound. This graph shows the percent change over the past 5 years in these currencies. However, about 50% of their revenue is coming from international right now, and as they expand their operations abroad, a lot of those revenues are going to be staying in those countries, which is going to help reduce this risk. Marwell will now discuss the details behind our valuation.
So we did 6 different types of valuation. We did 2 intrinsic and 4 relative. We weighted our DC at 50%, and the remaining 50% was distributed equally among our relative valuations. We do not weight the leverage value analysis, mainly because we didn't think it was likely to happen based on the current market conditions. All this led to an implied price of $27.73. I'm first going to touch on the relative valuation. Essentially, we needed to find a peer group, so what we did is we looked at annual reports, financial search engines, as well as their own investor relation report, which they give their own, identify a small peer group. So we had a list of about 30 companies, we had to narrow it down. So we looked at certain metrics, which are global exposure, past and future growth rates, beta, market cap, leverage, and PE. This is the peer group we came up with. And keep in mind, these are all diversified tech instrument companies that operate mainly in the commercial segment. Like Jake and Jack touched on earlier, that's where FLIR is aiming to go towards. So the first thing I want to talk about is just some market analysis. And essentially what it does is it ranks FLIR among its competitors based on certain parameters that represent leverage, profitability, size, and growth. And FLIR ranked half in the median and half in the third quartile. So we apply that ranking to the multiples. We did a weighted average 50% of both. And the weighted average multiples are now input into the calculations, which get us an implied price of $30.64. For the discounted cash flow analysis, I'm going to touch on the revenue as well as the assumptions. So for the revenue, I'm going to give it down to 1-year projections as well as long-term projections. 1 year, we're expecting thermal vision measurement to have strong growth, but we see stronger growth in the long term. Ray Marine and ICX are cutting unprofitable lines as well as cutting costs, and they are
1 minute.
And they are so they have strong growth as well. So government systems is poor growth because of decrease in backlog. Long term, like I said, we expect strong growth for thermal vision and measurement. Ray Marine, government systems, and ICX will all be reverting to standard industry growth. For our assumptions, we did an exit multiple, which was 8.5. That was calculated from historical averages of comparable firms, as well as historical averages of mature firms in FLIR's industry. With a weighted average cost of capital of 10.4% from estimated debt of 1.07, we land at a price of $26.63. So like we said earlier, we see strong growth for FLIR, but we think, but the market has already priced that in. So with that, we're recommending a hold. And before we go to questions, we'd just like to say a special thanks to the CFA community of Portland, as well as FLIR and the following people. It's been a great pleasure, a great adventure, and a lot of work went into this. So we'd like now to ask some questions.